everybody. I'm here in my art studio, and the reason why I'm making a video this week is because I've been working on creating a quilt, and I thought it would be a great project for us in Art Guild to make a family quilt that you create based on your family and things that are important to you. And then I thought it would be really fun if you created some type of a digital photograph of that, sent it to me, and I put them all together to make a Pawling Art Guild family quilt. So the first thing that I wanted to do is to kind of show you a couple different ways that you can make your quilt this week. I'll have some samples on our Google Classroom for you to look at of different ways of creating the quilt, and with some different patterns and designs and colors and things that you'll be able to pick from. And the first thing that we have to start off with is looking at how quilts are really just made up of different geometric patterns. So if you look at this one here, and I'll close in so you can see it a little bit better. This one here is called a star pattern, and it looks very complicated, but if I was to take some of these and just separate them a little bit, you can see how it's just a square that is made up of two triangles. So this one here, if we were to look at just purple, we have 4 purple triangles that are placed together. And in the middle is where all of those triangles come together. So this one may seem very complicated, but when you look at it closely and we just break up all of those little squares, a quilt is really just made up of smaller pieces. So if you start with a square and you were to cut that into 2 pieces, then we have 2 triangles. And depending on how you arrange them, you can have a lot of really fun different patterns. So for example, if we didn't want to do a star, if instead we wanted to do something called a pinwheel, I can move all of my squares out of the way here for a minute. And I think I'm going to start with purple again because we were already talking about that a little bit. And maybe bluish green here. So I'm going to start with one triangle pointing to the center. And then I'm going to line up my next triangle right on top of that one, and I'm going to spin it in the center to separate it. Then I'm going to do another one where I'm going to line it up on top, and I'm going to spin it again. And then I'm going to do that one more time. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my green shapes in between to turn them into squares. And then push them together so that they're lined up. Here we go. We have a pinwheel made out of the bluish green and purple here. If we wanted to, we could change it up again by just taking these same things. And what if I brought 2 of them and spun them around? And now we have a repeated pattern that kind of looks like mountains that are going back and forth. And if we went one more step and spun these around, now we have a diamond in the middle of our section. So you could have the same triangles and arrange them in a lot of different ways. So what should you use? If you don't have regular colored paper at home, I just used some scrap paper that I had cut out from pieces from scrapbooking. You could use those if you want, but if you don't have those, I wanted to show you some really great ways of being creative around your house. First thing, if you look around, there is a lot of packaging that comes wrapped around things. Like this one was a pack of Christmas cards that had a really cute animal on the front of it that I set aside because I thought someday I might use this for a project. So looking at different packaging might work. Gift bags. I saved things that people give me, and I was able to set this aside for creating something that has some really neat designs and textures on it. This is just wrapping paper. So I found some of this laying around. Tissue paper, it's another great thing. Here's another piece of a different type of wrapping paper that has some fun designs on it. I also like just using cardboard. It has some really cool textures, and you could even color some designs or paint on top of these to create some different patterns if you didn't have patterned paper. Here's another thing that I just got when I went shopping. They gave me this that came after I was checking out. It has really neat designs on it too, so I set this aside to use because I thought this would be fun to put into a quilt one day. You can also be really creative if you look around. This was a little pamphlet that somebody gave to me because my husband is a veteran. I thought it would be really awesome to incorporate something with flags or something that has to do with this imagery because he was in the Navy. So that was kind of important to me and my family. So I wanted to include some of this with it. So if you look around, you might be able to find some scrap things or stuff in the recycle bin that you could use for your quilt. So once you have your paper and you're ready to get started, the next step is to create your squares. If you have a little cutter at home, you're welcome to use these to create your squares. But if you don't have that, it's just as easy to use a ruler to measure your squares to make them even. So if you start with the larger piece, and I know for these squares that I'm already working with, I was making them 4 inches by 4 inches. So if I wanted another piece, I would just start by lining up my ruler along the edge and marking at 4 inches. And don't forget, we always learned in art class that you have to measure 2 times and connect those to make sure that the line is parallel to the side and it won't be crooked. And then I'm going to turn my paper and go the other direction to make sure that that is also 4 inches. There we go. And then I'm going to cut it with my scissors, making sure that I go nice and slow so that I'm staying right on the lines. And then if your pencil line is still showing a little bit, you can erase that too to get rid of the pencil line so it doesn't show up in your design. So once you've done that and you have a whole bunch of squares, the next step is to either turn them into smaller squares or to create triangles like I was showing you. If you look online, there's a lot of different patterns and designs for quilt making. Sometimes people might want to have smaller squares within the quilt patch. So to do that, all I'm going to do is fold my square in half and then fold it in half again, going the opposite direction. So now I have a cross going in the middle of my paper. I'm going to use my scissors to cut this in half. And then we can use these to place them on another square to create a quilt patch within that square. And if you wanted to make a triangle, it's really easy. We're just going to take our square and fold it in half diagonally so that you make a triangle. Crease it really good. And then I'm going to cut this in half again, going across the length, going very slow to make sure that it is right on the line. And then I'm going to use this to create the designs inside of my quilt patch. So if you look at this one here, I was doing the pinwheel, trying to make the designs line up, but we could also do other designs, like we said, by spinning some of these or putting a square inside. So if I use this square here, inside of that design, you can then end up with a lot of different patterns that you can make. Now, if you wanted to, once you have finished cutting everything out, you can use either a glue stick or Elmer's glue to glue all of the paper down. I found that if you take a really heavy book and put it on top of it while it's drying, it will help keep all of the edges from sticking up. You can then go back in and use pencils or pens or paint to create designs over the top of your quilt and really have fun when you're thinking about composition and arranging the quilt. What types of colors might represent your family? Do you want to use your family crest? Do you want to use different cultural aspects about your family? You could even use photos if you'd like to in your quilt. Be creative, come up with whatever type of composition that you want for your quilt. When you're all done, we're going to take a picture using either your Chromebook or your phone or a camera, and then send that to me digitally, and I'm going to put all of the pieces together so that we'll have one large quilt that we will do for a collaboration. All right, if you have any questions, just feel free to email me and make sure that you look through some of the samples before you get started. Miss everybody. Bye.